When we think about the 18th century in India, a lot of us just, we shrug. It's often painted with this really broad, gloomy brush, a dark age, an age of chaos. It's like this 100-year skip button in history, implying that, well, nothing really important happened between the Great Mughals and the British Raj.
And you have to understand, that narrative wasn't an accident. It was a very tidy, almost self-serving piece of historical packaging.
Promoted by British historians mostly.
Largely, yes. And it served a really crucial political purpose for them.
Which was what, exactly?
Well, it made the British presence seem like a necessary intervention. I mean, if you paint the 18th century as pure chaos and decay, then the British arriving in the 19th can say, look, we're the saviors.
Right, we brought reunification, we brought order.
And enlightenment.
Yeah.
To a subcontinent that, in their view, could manage itself. Is a very convenient story.
Okay, so let's unpack that claim. Because the sources we're looking at today really force us to challenge that simple narrative. Our mission in this deep dive is to get past that Dark Age myth and understand the true, incredibly complex nature of this period.
To find the structure in the chaos.
Exactly.
And what's really eye-opening, is that the scholarship now argues that while the Mughal Empire, the central political structure, was undeniably collapsing, India itself was far from economically dead.
Far from it, right.
Absolutely. The sources suggest that compared to contemporary Europe, India was still extremely rich, highly productive, and a huge magnet for international trade. This wasn't a society that failed, it was a state that failed.
So if we get rid of the moralizing label of a dark age, what are we left with? What's a better definition?
I think the best word is transition. It's an age of transition. The 18th century is defined by this massive power vacuum that opens up when the old centralized empire just fades away.
And into that vacuum rush all these competing forces.
A ruthless, high-stakes competition. And you've really got three overlapping forces at play. You have a crumbling Mughal structure, you have rising independent regional powers, and crucially, you have these ambitious European trading companies just lurking on the coasts.
That sets the stage perfectly. To understand the whole picture, we really have to look at all three of those themes.
And our roadmap for today starts with the core problem. The decline of the Mughal Empire, which really dominates the first half of the century.
And that decline is what allows for the second theme.
The rise of autonomous states. You get the successor states like Hyderabad and Bengal that just sort of break away, and then you have the new states like the Marathas and the Sikhs who fight their way into existence.
And when those two internal forces, the declining empire and the rising states, basically fight each other to exhaustion.
That's when the third theme comes to dominate the second half of the century.
Yeah.
The rise of British supremacy. You have to grasp the depth of the internal failure to explain the success of the external power.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The heart of the decline. Conventionally, we mark the beginning of the end with the death of Emperor Aurangzeb in 1707. But the sources are pretty clear now. The collapse didn't just happen after him.
No. The structural failures that guaranteed the collapse were really engineered during his 50-year reign. That's the key distinction. For all his power, Aurangzeb was, in many ways, the architect of the empire's demise.
And the sources point to three sort of fatal errors. The first one seems almost obvious.
Overexpansion.
Right. He just took on too much.
Exactly. Ambition outran administration. One source calls the empire an inflated balloon. It just grew too vast, stretching beyond manageable limits. Just think for a second about the logistics of trying to govern from Delhi all the way down into the deepest parts of the Deccan.
It's a nightmare. Communications, justice, just keeping control.
Almost impossible, especially with regional loyalties getting stronger and stronger.
And that overreach leads directly to the second catastrophic error, the one that really drained the bank.
The Deccan Wars. This is often labeled the true killer. Aurangzeb spent nearly 2 decades, 20 long, fruitless years, fighting the Marathas in the very hostile terrain of the Deccan Plateau.
And this wasn't a war for a quick victory. It was more like a long, drawn-out insurgency.
Exactly. And it was an economic black hole. You're talking about deploying the empire's best generals, its largest armies, far from the rich heartland, year after year after year.
So it's draining money.
Money, and also its most experienced manpower. The term that historians coined for this is perfect. The Deccan ulcer.
An ulcer, that's a great image. It's not one single wound, it's something that just slowly eats away at you from the inside.
Precisely. A slow, persistent infection that just consumed the core strength of the empire, leaving almost nothing left for the rulers who came after him.
So with all that manpower and money gone, what tools are even left for his successors? Short-term bribery.
Practically nothing else. Financial reserves, the best soldiers, the moral authority, it's all been depleted. And then you have Aurangzeb's third error compounding all of this. His socio-religious policies.
He was a fundamentalist.
A very devout fundamentalist Muslim, and his policies, like reintroducing the jizya tax on non-Muslims, alienated huge parts of the population.
Creating enemies at home while fighting a war abroad.
Exactly. This alienation translates directly into powerful, sustained rebellions, the Marathas, the Sikhs, the Jats. So the empire's fighting externally in the Deccan, and at the same time battling major internal revolts across the north. By 1707, when he dies, the stage is just primed for crisis.
So who steps into this mess? His son, Bahadur Shah Ros, who takes the throne after the usual bloody war of succession at the age of 65.
Yeah, and to his credit, Bahadur Shah, I saw the problems. The sources describe him as learned and more tolerant than his father. He knew he had to sort of lower the political temperature.
So he tries to reverse some of the damage.
He does. He rolls back some of the harsh religious policies, makes peace with the powerful Rajput clans and the Jats, and crucially, he releases the Maratha prince Shahu from prison.
Why was that so important?
The idea was to pacify the Marathas by creating a civil war among them, which it only partially worked. He still had to deal with major threats, like the Sikh leader Banda Bahadur, who he fought for his entire reign.
So diplomatically, he's trying to patch things up, but financially, he makes things worse.
Oh, much worse. He dramatically accelerates the financial crisis. To buy support for the powerful nobles who now know there's a power vacuum, he starts lavishly granting lands or jagirs and handing out promotions left and right.
So he's basically giving away the state's last remaining assets.
He's buying short-term loyalty at the cost of the state's future. It was just administrative recklessness born out of political desperation.
And his nickname reflects this, doesn't it?
It really does. He was known as Shahi Bekabar,
The headless king.
or the king who ignores. It tells you everything that right after the iron-fisted Aurangzeb, you get a ruler whose defining trait is a total lack of attention to the business of the state.
So once the headless king dies in 1712, the whole power structure shifts again. We move from a failed monarchy into the age of the kingmakers.
This is the pivotal shift. Before, nobles supported princes to get influence. Now, the sources say the most powerful nobles became direct aspirants to the throne. They stopped being subjects and started being power brokers.
So the emperors, the descendants of Akbar, they're just instruments now.
They're pawns. Pawns in a game played by these incredibly powerful nobles. The real center of power in India moves from the emperor's throne in the Red Fort to the wazir's or prime minister's office.
And the Mughal court just breaks down into these warring factions. Our sources break them down into four main groups.
That's right. The first two are the big ones, the Turanis, who are from Central Asia and were Sunni, and the Iranis from Persia, who were Shia.
The traditional foreign nobility.
Right, constantly fighting each other. Then you had the Afghans, who were powerful militarily. And finally, you had a rising group, the Hindustanis, Indian-born Muslims, who often allied with powerful Hindu groups like the Rajputs and the Jats.
And it's fascinating that the sources stress these groups used race and religion purely as tools. This wasn't about ideology.
Not at all. It was cynical, transactional politics. They used these ethnic and religious loyalties to build factions, to get the numbers they needed at court, to install their puppet emperor. It made any kind of coherent long-term policy completely impossible.
Okay, let's look at the first clear example of this, Jahandar Shah. He only lasts about a year, 1712 to 1713.
Right, and he was completely reliant on his kingmaker, an Irani noble named Zulfikar Khan, who becomes the wazir. Zulfikar Khan is the one actually running the show.
And he did try to implement some pragmatic policies, didn't he?
He did. He continued that policy of reconciliation. He made friends with the Rajputs and the Marathas. And very importantly, he abolished the jizya, that hated tax on non-Muslims, a clear move to win support.
So, a smart political operator. But he also introduced one truly catastrophic policy that just wrecked the state's relationship with its people.
Ijara, revenue farming.
Explain how that worked, because it sounds disastrous.
It was. It was born out of complete financial desperation. The government would essentially rent out the right to collect taxes in a district to the highest bidder. The state gets a big lump sum of cash up front, which they desperately needed.
But in exchange, they're basically washing their hands of their responsibility to the people.
Exactly. The revenue farmer, who just paid a huge fee, now has only one goal: squeeze as much money as possible out of the peasantry to make a profit. Any incentive for long-term health of the region is gone.
The sources are pretty clear this just led to mass exploitation.
Relentless oppression of the peasantry. It created huge rural debt and led to widespread rebellion. It was a short-sighted financial move that mortgaged the empire's future for a quick buck.
And like all puppets, Jahandar Shah didn't last long.
No, he was defeated and killed by his nephew, Farrukhsiyar, who of course was backed by an even more powerful set of kingmakers.
The famous Sayyid brothers, Abdullah Khan and Hussein Ali Khan.
They are the absolute peak of the kingmaker era. They installed Farrukhsiyar in 1713, and they were extremely capable administrators, but their emperor was incapable and irresolute, so the Sayyids were the de facto rulers.
They continued the policies of tolerance, abolished the jizya again, and even managed to execute the Sikh leader Banda Bahadur. So they were maintaining some order.
They were, but their time in power is remembered for one single, careless decision that changed the course of Indian history.
The Farman of 1717.
This is where the British East India Company steps from the wings onto the main stage.
So set the scene for this colossal mistake.
The story is almost comically simple. A British surgeon, William Hamilton, cures Emperor Farrukhsiyar of some painful illness, and as a reward, the emperor, and the source uses the word heedlessly, grants the company a farman, a royal order.
And what did this farman give them?
It gave the British East India Company exemption from custom duties for their trade in Bengal. This meant they could ship goods without paying the local taxes that every other merchant, Indian or otherwise, had to pay.
So if you're the governor of Bengal, the Nawab, you're suddenly losing a huge chunk of your revenue.
A massive chunk. The sources call this a perpetual source of conflict. The Nawabs were losing money, and the British company immediately started abusing the privilege, using the tax-free passes for the private trade of their own officials.
So this single document, given as a thank you for a medical procedure, directly creates the financial conflict that leads, decades later, to the Battle of Plassey.
A historic blunder. Trading sovereign fiscal power for a personal favor. But the chaos in Delhi continues. Farrukhsiyar, like all puppets, gets tired of his strings and conspires against the Sayyids.
And the Sayyids show him just how powerless he really is.
They retaliate with brutal efficiency, they get help from the Marathas, they dethrone the emperor, and then they commit the ultimate crime.
They blind and murder him.
And this is just a chilling moment. The sources make it very clear. This is the first time in Mughal history an emperor was murdered by his own nobles.
It's the point of no return.
Absolutely. That act completely shatters the sacred symbolic authority of the imperial crown. The message was clear. The emperor is now just an employee, and he could be fired. Violently.
So the empire is structurally broken. The political class is literally killing itself. And now we enter the reign of Muhammad Shah, installed by the Sayyid brothers in 1719 after they murder Farrukhsiyar.
Yes, and Muhammad Shah was a pawn, but a shrewd one. He quickly realized the Sayyids were too powerful, too dangerous. So in 1720, with the help of another powerful noble, Nizam-ul-Mulk, he has the Sayyid brothers assassinated.
This sounds like a huge opportunity. The kingmakers are gone. The emperor is back in control. The sources call this the last chance to save the empire.
It was the definitive last chance. But Muhammad Shah was, well, he was profoundly not the man for the job. Despite getting rid of the Sayyids, he was weak-minded and frivolous.
And he gets that infamous nickname.
Ranjila, the pleasure lover, known for his fondness for wine and women.
It's just incredible. The empire is literally disintegrating, and the man at the top is known as the pleasure lover.
And the really capable nobles, the smart administrators and generals, they look at this fickle-minded emperor, and they just give up on Delhi. They realize the center is broken beyond repair.
So they stop fighting for power in Delhi, and they just leave.
They leave to found their own virtually independent kingdoms. This is the rise of the successor states.
So who are the key figures who just walk away?
First and foremost, Nizam-ul-Mulk, the guy who helped kill the Sayyids. He sees the writing on the wall, leaves Delhi, and establishes the state of Hyderabad in 1724. A huge loss of talent for the center.
And then in the north?
Sadat Khan establishes Awadh in 1722. And Murshid Quali Khan had already established Bengal in 1717. They might still pay some lip service to the emperor, but for all practical purposes, they are now independent rulers. They control their own armies, they keep their own revenue.
And while Muhammad Shah Ranjila is enjoying himself, the external threats are just getting worse.
Exponentially worse. The Marathas grow even bolder, they expand north, and they even raid Delhi itself in 1737, proving the empire can't even defend its own capital city anymore.
All of this decay, this internal rot, it's just setting the stage for the real fatal blow, the external shock that reveals the weakness to the whole world.
Nadir Shah's invasion in 1739.
The king of Persia.
Yes, and he wasn't just some random invader. He was attracted by the legendary wealth of India. He'd heard the reports of the chaos in Delhi, the weakness of the emperor, and he smelled blood in the water.
And the Mughal military response.
A complete disaster. The army was a mess, full of internal rivalries, and led by incompetent nobles, because all the good generals had already left for Hyderabad and Awadh. They were crushed at the Battle of Karnal.
And Nadir Shah just walks into Delhi.
And unleashes a terrible massacre on the city. But the real impact was the sheer scale of the plunder.
This is where he gets the big prizes.
The two most famous symbols of Mughal power: the legendary peacock throne and the priceless Kohinoor diamond. The total loot was estimated at 70 crores. An absolutely astronomical sum.
70 crores, just to put that in perspective. What could you do with that much money back then?
Well, the sources tell us Nadir Shah took so much wealth from Delhi that he was able to cancel all taxes in his own kingdom of Persia for 3 full years.
Wow.
It wasn't just a robbery. It was a complete financial decapitation of the Mughal state. There was no coming back from that.
And what was the geopolitical fallout?
It exposed the hidden weakness of the empire to everyone. The Marathas, the European companies watching from the coast, they all saw that the emperor was a paper tiger. And critically, it left the northwest frontier wide open.
Open for the next guy, the new scourge.
Ahmad Shah Abdali, or Durrani. He's one of Nadir Shah's best generals. He saw the blueprint for invasion firsthand. When Nadir Shah was assassinated, Abdali became king of Afghanistan and knew that the door to India was unlocked.
And he didn't just walk through it, he kicked it down repeatedly.
7 times. He invaded India 7 times between 1748 and 1767. Just wave after wave of invasions, plundering the north and forcing the remaining Indian powers to constantly fight him.
And this all culminates in that huge, decisive battle.
The Third Battle of Panipat in 1761. This is the real turning point, not for the Mughals, they were already irrelevant, but for the Marathas. They were the only internal power left that had a chance of replacing the Mughals.
They were trying to build a new pan-Indian empire.
And Abdali just crushes them, utterly destroys the Maratha army, kills their best leaders, and shatters their ambition of controlling Delhi.
So, if the Mughals have already collapsed, and the only potential replacement, the Marathas, are now crushed by an outside invader, what's left?
A total power vacuum.
Yeah.
No single strong Indian power is left to control the subcontinent, and that vacuum is the single greatest opportunity for the rising European powers.
Especially the British. Okay, so while all this military chaos is happening in the north, what's going on back in Delhi? We have the next emperor, Ahmad Shah, on the throne from 1748.
The situation in the capital just devolves into this domestic farce. Ahmad Shah is completely weak. He leaves affairs of state to his mother, Udambai, and her lover, a eunuch named Javed Khan.
So the court isn't even a government anymore.
It's a circus. And his response to the repeated invasions of Abdali, appeasement. He just surrenders the key frontier provinces of Punjab and Multan to the Afghans to make them go away. He's literally giving away the empire piece by piece.
And during this time, the nobles, the kingmakers, they become even more terrifying.
We get the final, most brutal version of the kingmaker in Imad-ul-Mulk. He was the grandson of the capable Nizam-ul-Mulk, but he was just ruthless.
How ruthless are we talking?
In 1754, he marches into the palace, captures Emperor Ahmad Shah, blinds him, and deposes him. This horrific act is now just standard political procedure. He then installs his own puppet, Alamgir II.
And it's during Alamgir II's very brief reign, from 1754 to 1759, that the British take a huge step forward.
Yes, the Battle of Plassey happens in 1757. It's fought far away in Bengal, but it's the moment the British East India Company stops being just a trading company and becomes a real territorial power by defeating the Nawab of Bengal.
And what happens to Alamgir II? Does he meet the same fate as his predecessor?
Of course. In 1759, Imad-ul-Mulk has him murdered and puts another puppet on the throne. The crown is just being swapped between heads violently every few years. It's total anarchy.
This brings us to maybe the most tragic figure in the whole story, Shah Alam II. He has this incredibly long reign from 1760 to 1806, but he's just a spectator to the final collapse.
His entire life is defined by powerlessness. His reign sees the Marathas crushed at Panipat, and it also sees the most important military confrontation with the British.
The Battle of Buxar in 1764. Why is Buxar even more significant than Plassey?
Because at Buxar, Shah Alam II, the Mughal emperor himself, joins forces with the Nawabs of Bengal and Awadh to fight the British, and they lose, decisively.
So the highest legal authority in India is defeated on the battlefield by a trading company.
Which gives the British a kind of constitutional legitimacy they never had before. And Shah Alam II becomes what the sources call a fugitive emperor. He can't even enter his own capital, Delhi, for 12 years.
And then comes the ultimate legal turning point, the final nail in the coffin.
The Treaty of Allahabad in 1765. This is where the defeated emperor is forced to grant the British the Diwani of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa.
The Diwani being?
The right to collect all the tax revenue. Essentially, sovereign financial control over the richest provinces in India.
And what does Shah Alam II get in return for giving away the keys to the treasury?
He becomes a British pensioner. He's forced to live in Allahabad as a virtual prisoner, completely dependent on the East India Company for his income. The Emperor of India is now on a corporate payroll.
And the tragedy just keeps compounding. He eventually gets back to Delhi with the help of the Marathas.
But the humiliation isn't over. In 1788, a minor regional warlord, a Rohilla chief named Ghulam Qadir, captures Delhi and, with unbelievable brutality, blinds Shah Alam II.
It's hard to even imagine. The emperor, a descendant of Akbar, blinded by a minor chieftain in his own capital.
And it led to that famous, sad saying that summed up his entire reign. Sultanat-e Shah Alam, as Delhi to Palam.
The kingdom of Shah Alam is from Delhi to Palam.
And Palam was just a suburb. His empire was now the size of a neighborhood. And he was blind.
He goes from being a Maratha pensioner to eventually a British pensioner again when they take Delhi in 1803.
And his son, Akbar Shah II, follows in his footsteps. His main claim to fame is that he gave the title of Raja to Ram Mohan Roy and sent him to England to do what?
To ask for a raise.
To plead for a bigger pension. It's just the ultimate fall from grace. By 1835, the British don't even bother putting the emperor's name on their coins anymore. The pretense is over.
And so the final curtain falls on Bahadur Shah II, better known by his poetic name, Zafar.
The last Mughal emperor. A talented poet, but completely irrelevant politically. He's just living quietly in the Red Fort until 1857. The Great Revolt, when the rebels, desperate for a symbol of unity, proclaimed the old, reluctant poet as the Emperor of India.
A symbolic gesture that the British crush violently.
And when they retake Delhi, Zafar is captured. The Mughal Empire officially ends when he's deported to Rangoon in Burma, where he dies in exile in 1862. It's formally sealed on November 1st, 1858, with Queen Victoria's declaration, the end of an era.
So we've gone from Aurangzeb's overreach and the Deccan ulcer through the kingmakers and Muhammad Shah Ranjila, all the way to the blinding of one emperor and the exile of the last.
And it brings us back to our core idea. The 18th century wasn't just chaos, it was a structural transition, a transition that began with the systemic failures of Aurangzeb's reign.
Which were then exploited and accelerated by the cynical short-term ambitions of the kingmakers and their disastrous policies like Gujarat.
And the sources are completely clear on this point. The decline of the Mughal Empire is precisely what enabled the British to conquer India. They didn't defeat a strong, unified power. They stepped into the vacuum created by decades of internal collapse and foreign invasion.
And they cemented their power not just with guns, but by getting these legal documents, these careless grants of sovereign power.
Which brings us back to those two moments. The Farman of 1717 and the Treaty of Allahabad in 1765.
In 1717, an emperor heedlessly trades sovereign fiscal power tax exemptions for a personal medical cure.
And in 1765, another emperor, having lost a battle, trades the ultimate sovereign power, the right to all revenue, for a comfortable retirement pension.
That pattern. Trading core, national sovereignty for immediate personal comfort or survival. That seems to be the defining story here.
It absolutely is. And it explains how a trading company based thousands of miles away was able to dismantle one of the world's great empires.
So the provocative thought we want to leave you with is this. What are the long-term consequences when a nation's leadership starts prioritizing its own immediate personal survival, be it political, financial, or even medical, over the fundamental sovereign integrity of the state itself? That's the question that defines the end of the Mughals and the beginning of the Raj.